We've helped Israel here on the farm a lot, and we're grateful to see the farm growing and the success continuing. It's our a dream come true that Joel Salatin is here among us. Since the 1970s, when Israel Rappaport's father and crew started the settlement movement and came to these mountains. Many of you came to these mountains. It was a hard go. A lot of rocks. Still a lot of rocks. Farming is not easy. To have the world's most famous farmer to come and to give ideas, encourage the farms. We've been going, thanks to Joel for his time, and he's spent a week here. We've been going from farm after farm after farm throughout this Judea and Samaria area, day after day. This will be day three already. We've got a week, so we're just really getting going. But it's an extreme honor and a dream come true to have Joel Salatin here, giving. It's very close to my heart. Is the restoration of the land of Israel. When we cover up these barren mountains, rocky, briar-filled mountains, with new vegetation, life coming back to these hills, it's so much bigger than us. It's like we've been talking about a lot. What gets you up in the morning? That's what gets me up in the morning. When we can see a land that was desolate for 2,000 years coming back to life. And to have Joel here aiding that process of the land coming back to life is a real honor. So Joel Salatin, would you come up here and inspire the farmers of the mountains of Israel? I know, actually, we have people from all over the country here. So we're grateful for that. Joel Salatin, go ahead and
Thank you. How many people are you translating for?
I think for 5.
Okay.
מי לא דבר אנגלית פה?
יש כאן.
רק 4, כן?
Okay. Good. I just wanted to get a sense of it, so that we know. So I'm going to talk a little slower than normal, in order to for Bakia to be able to do the translation. And thank you, Bakia. It's a real privilege. So it is a great honor to be here in this place with you all, and to be able to participate in this great drama of ultimate good and evil and eternity. The biggest temptation in a situation like this is to assume that the other person has it easier, and to take an idea and say, well, that won't work here. And I've learned, for me, a great check on my spirit, my attitude, is what is my first impression when presented with a new idea? Is it, oh, no. Or is it, tell me more? And I suffer from the same problem. Somebody comes with a new idea, and I'm quick to say, well, that won't work. My best example was an Australian who came to the farm. This is back 25 years ago, and he went out to the field to look at our chickens. We have these pastured chickens. They're in little portable shelters. We raise meat chickens and laying chickens, and these were laying chickens, and we move them every day, and we've been featured in the New York Times and Acres USA magazine, pictures. I mean, we were the pastured poultry kings, right? He comes out, looks at it for about 5 minutes, and says, "You're obsolete." I was offended. I'm obsolete? Don't you know who I am? This was 25 years ago. And he said, and so then after I recovered a little bit, I said, "Why?" He said, "Because there's a new material. It's electrified poultry netting. And you can just put it out, and now we've been using electric fence for cows for a long time. Single strand, simple. But electric fence for chickens, I'd never heard of such a thing. And he said it'll keep out foxes, it'll keep the chickens in, they'll be happier, less labor, better eggs, everybody wins." And I would not try it for 3 years. Don't you know how much time I spent building these shelters? Don't you know how much time I've spent talking to reporters about the media about how this works? We get emotionally and economically enslaved to our stuff. And our stuff holds us back from trying something new. And 3 years later, 3 years go by, and a friend of mine, conversation, said, "Hey, I heard about this new electrified poultry netting. I'm going to try some." Well, then suddenly my offense at being told I was obsolete gave way to my pride of competing with this friend. He's not going to do something before me, so I'm going to do this first. So I quickly bought the special fencing, came in a box, and I took it out to the field and decided that I would set it up and see it not work. Because after all, I had built shelters. I had been featured in, okay? So I took it out, I set it up around just one shelter. I took a 5-gallon bucket, picked up the corner of the shelter, stuck it under, let the chickens run out. Now this wasn't meat chickens, this was layers. Big difference. We still use the ones for I'm getting ahead of the story. So put it under the bucket, and I stepped outside the wire to watch it not work. And in 5 minutes, I realized I was obsolete. He was right. This was a better idea. And we abandoned all that for the layers and ended up building the Millennium Feather Net, which we use today with 1,000 birds in the portable netting, and we move it every couple of days along the field. And it dropped our labor in half, gave us better eggs, and happier chickens. It was everybody won. They eat less feed. Everything was positive. And it just shows how quickly, how easily we become enslaved to the infrastructure, equipment, buildings, even to our paradigm. Most of the time, we're so involved in what we're doing business people call it working in the business. Working in the business. It's called Whitby. W-I-T-B. Working in the business. I don't know how you do that in Pastor. All right. What that means is that we're so busy doing what we do that we don't even take time to realize why or where we're headed. And so sometimes it takes a person from outside looking at our situation to expand our ideas, our possibilities, like a person that's on a boat in a river and they're heading to a waterfall, and somebody out on the shore that can see the picture from outside says, "Hey, stop, you're going to go over a waterfall." And the guy in the boat says, "Shut up, I don't see any waterfall. We're having a good time in the river." And so that's the way we tend to be. And so as I start here this afternoon, my greatest encouragement, I don't have all the answers, I don't have the recipes, I have a story. And I have some ideas and a little bit of expertise. And so take the principles and just enjoy them for what they are at the beginning. We can fight about it later. All right? But start to just appreciate the story where it is. Because we can all learn from each other. I've already learned a lot here. And I've never been a place that I didn't learn something. Because the temptation is, well, that place gets more rain. Or that guy has better equipment, the kind that starts. That guy has better sheep. They actually pay attention. That guy has a better spouse. A spouse that likes new ideas and doesn't roll her eyes when you come in with crazy notions. Okay? And the truth is, all of us have our battles to wage, all of us have our hills to climb, all of us have our issues. And generally, if we heard the other person's problems, we'd take our own back. And so we all have our assets and our liabilities. Now, just to show, I hope, for a little bit, that I've traveled the world for years, and what I've learned is that we are far more similar than dissimilar. Everybody wants fulfilling vocation, legacy, healthy children, productive children, healthy relationships. Everybody wants that in every culture, every religion, every place. We are more similar than dissimilar. And to help express a little bit of that for you all, let me tell you a little bit of our family's story so that you can appreciate maybe a little more where I'm coming from here today. So, my dad was in the Navy in World War II, flew bombers in the Navy, and when he was about 12 or 13, a little Midwestern kid from Indiana, no money, no land, he had this dream of farming. Where am I going to farm? I don't have money, I don't have land, my family doesn't have anything. And he became enamored of a developing country. He picked South America. If I could go to South America, like a new frontier. So he nursed that dream through high school, Navy, goes to Indiana University, gets his degree in business administration, goes to Middlebury in Vermont and gets 6 months of Spanish, hitchhikes to Mexico, spends 6 months, comes back and sits for the Foreign Civil Service exam for American diplomats and stuff, in bilingual in Spanish, passes it his first time, gets hired on as a bilingual accountant with Texas Oil Company, and goes to Venezuela, South America. Stationed off of the coast there of Puerto La Cruz in Venezuela as an accountant for these oil wells, these wildcat ventures. They wanted a bilingual accountant because the tension was always about money, because Americans managed the wellheads and the work was done by the Venezuelans. And the Americans spoke English, the Venezuelans spoke Spanish, and you had the company store, payroll, taxes, and the tension was always about money. So the one person they wanted to be able to speak bilingually in they called them man camps. The guys would come out and live in the week and then go home for the weekend and then come back, was the accountant. So Dad was there. It was a very short-term kind of position in history. You know, only lasted probably 15 to 20 years was that kind of position. But it was very high paying, and in 7 years he was able to save enough money to buy 4,000 dunams of upland land in Venezuela, and started his dream of farming. By that time he had married Mom, and started out there. There was no electricity. It was just jungle. Began clearing a little bit. The dream was, he saw the opportunity in dairy and chicken. Those were two things that indigenous farmers were not doing much. And so, of course, chickens are quick, so they started raising chickens. Well, in that time, this is mid-1950s, there were no supermarkets, there were no grocery stores. So you know how those Latin American markets are, a lot like Middle Eastern markets. You know, you have the farmers, they come in with their wares and set up in the village square, and then vendors would come and buy, I'll buy papayas from you, pineapples, bananas, chicken, and then they would take them through the city and sell them to the households. And if I'm the senora, I spoke Spanish before English, and I want papayas for supper, I come to the papaya. Wait for the papaya guy. I said, yeah, I'll buy, 2 or 3, whatever. And then if I want pineapples, I get them from the pineapple. And from the chicken guy, he comes with chickens. They're live. They're hanging live, tied with their feet to a pole that he's got over his shoulder. And I take my hand and I rub it down the beak of the chicken and test for snot, mucus drip. All the indigenous chickens had subtherapeutic pneumonia due to the unhygienic way they were raised. They just ran through sewers and squat pots and filth, dirty, dirty floors in chicken runs and stuff, and they were all pretty unhygienic. And so the drier a beak, or the less moist, they commanded a higher price because it was a healthier chicken, and everybody understood that. They knew that. And so, of course, these vendors attracted customers based on how good their product was. You wanted the best bananas, the best pineapples, the best cassava, okay? And the best chicken. Well, Dad shows up with chickens, and not only are they not dripping snot, the beaks dry. And so quickly, within just weeks, here, all the vendors, the chicken vendors who are the middlemen who take the stuff through the city, there's 4 vendors there, 4 farmers with chickens. They're not buying their chickens. They're waiting for Dad to get there for his booth, and he corners the local chicken market. Now, do you think that any of those other farmers asked him, Senor Salatin, how do you, right? How do you have chickens? What did I do?
You didn't do anything yet.
Okay,
Not yet.
thank you. Got to protect me from myself. That's really important. So how do you do these clean chickens? Nobody asked. What they said was, that family is practicing witchcraft. Voodoo. They've got fairies, whatever. And they resented it. They resented it. So things are rocking along. He's got these 2 boys coming on, 1959, a junta. Pérez Jiménez, the dictator, gets taken down in a coup d'etat, revolution. And what happens in anarchy is that lots of things get settled that don't get settled when there's a rule of law. And so we became a settlement. And this was a chance to run us out of town, to get rid of these people doing these witches. And so we fled the back door as the machine guns came in the front door. Spent another 6 months in Caracas, the capital city. Dad met with the interior minister, the prime minister, the secretary of state, secretary of the interior, secretary of commerce. No help. Can't do anything. And so there was nothing to do but walk away and leave. And Dad was 39 and lost all of his life savings, all of his work. He was there 12 years. He loved the country, loved the language, loved the people. He had truly expatriated to Venezuela. And of course, we kids, we didn't know any different. We just were born and grew up there, And so we came back to the States. And I know when I hit 39, Dad had passed away by then. When I hit 39, I remember thinking, wow, if I lost it all today, would I start over? And we started over. And so we came back, landed in Philadelphia in Easter Sunday, 1961. And normally you'd think, well, you'd go back to the Midwest where you have family. Mom was from Ohio, Dad was from Indiana. You'd think you got your family there, go back. Dad was still hoping to go back to Venezuela. He was hoping that things would settle and we'd be able to go back. So instead of going to the Midwest, we wanted to settle within a day's drive of Washington, D.C., so that if things settled down, we'd get a call from the Venezuelan embassy, and we could get up there in a couple of hours, sign papers, and head back to Venezuela. That never happened. But that's why we ended up settling where we did in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia, on the worst gullied rock pile, armpit piece of property in the area. This place had been absentee owned for about 40 to 50 years before the 1940s, and over that period of European colonization and settlement, it lost anywhere from 3 to 8 feet of topsoil. It was all plowed. It was all grown in wheat, barley, corn, It was all, the hillsides were plowed. Everything was plowed. It was overgrazed. We had one gully top to bottom that was 5 meters deep, top to bottom. We measured it. And we had these just like corrugated roofing down the hillsides. We had large areas. I can remember twice the size of this room, maybe 3 times. About a dunam in size. And I remember as a child, solid rock. No soil, no grass, no weed, no plant, no nothing. Just now, unlike here, where you have these kind of, round and igneous type rocks, we were shale, at least on that side of the river. And so these were like saucers, plates on the ground, and just solid rock. And Dad sought counsel early on. He said, from both public and private sources, how do I make a living on this farm? All the advice was graze the forest, plant corn, borrow more money, buy chemical fertilizer, build silos. Well, my grandfather, Dad's father, was a charter subscriber to Rodale's Organic Gardening and Farming magazine when it came out in 1948. A lot of people don't realize that the world really convulsed right there post-World War II. You know that it did here. But the world was convulsing on many fronts post-World War II. Not the least of which was, how are we going to maintain fertility? You have to realize that at that time, there was still a lot of horsepower, mules, in our area. Tractors hadn't even completely taken over yet. There was a lot of draft power. Rural electrification hadn't even come to our area yet. People didn't have electricity. The war effort, you know what you make bombs out of? Nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus. Well, in 1837, an Austrian biochemist named Justus von Liebig had introduced a brand new concept to the world, that everything living, people, plants, animals, is simply a rearrangement of nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus, NPK. And for the first time in human history, large sectors of the global population embraced a mechanical, chemical view to life. That life was not fundamentally, or that biology was not the foundation of life. It was actually chemistry and mechanics. It was inanimate. That had never been done throughout history. Now, different religions had different, in the Judeo-Christian religion, God created the earth. In other, in Native American folklore, it's everything from a big turtle comes out of the sky and turns upside down and drops animals and plants out of it. The Scandinavian cultures have a different, view. But the point is that until that time, there was worldwide consensus that there was a primal cause, and that biology was that there was a difference between something that was alive and something that was just inanimate. Okay? But Justus von Liebig changed that. And of course, 1837, interestingly, is also the year that another significant thing happened. A scientist from Great Britain set sail on a ship named the Beagle. Who knows his name? Charles Darwin, thank you. Yes, Charles Darwin. And he, think about this, he brought to us the idea of evolution. That there was no God involved in creation. And so that, coupled with NPK, that life is just an inanimate structure, those two things really changed the way farming, agriculture, plants, and animals were perceived in the world. And so here we come, post-World War II. What are we going to do about fertility? Dad lost a son or two in the war. He was counting on that labor on the farm. They're gone. He's presented with two alternatives. This little bag of 10-10-10 chemical, or there's a new hot guy on the scene named Sir Albert Howard, who wrote an agricultural testament. 1943, introduced scientific aerobic composting to the world. The formula for aerobic composting. 1943. Well, we all know the world was involved in a great conflagration it was a little bit distracted in 1943. But it was essentially that life is fundamentally a biological decomposition regeneration system. Okay? So we have life, death, decomposition, regeneration, life, death, decomposition, regeneration. You have this cycle. And what builds soil, what grows plants is, yes, there is chemistry involved, but what makes the chemistry happen is the biological activity. Let me just share a really neat one with you. When organic material, vegetation, decomposes in the soil, it gives off a gas. Does anybody know what that gas is? Well, carbon dioxide, CO2, yes, carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide. Okay, so I want you to imagine in your imagination the soil as being like a building with all sorts of rooms, this aggregate, all right? So you've got all these rooms, and it's kind of a swampy, thing, and this carbon dioxide is up through, are you with me? This, okay? And as the carbon dioxide contacts H2O, water, H2O plus CO2 makes a carbonic acid. All right? Now, if I picked up a rock out here, I should have picked one up. Picked up a rock out here. Here we go. Yeah, thank you. All right, we got object lesson. Does everybody here agree that that rock probably has the same minerals in it that it did 1,000 years ago? I mean, nothing drilled into the rock and pulled out just the boron. Okay? Or just the molybdenum. Or just the calcium. That rock has not changed in 1,000 years. It's just as potent and mineralized as it was 1,000 years ago. Now, if we wanted to find out how much cobalt, molybdenum, boron, selenium, calcium is in that rock, we could treat it with sulfuric acid, hydrochloric acid. Guess what acid is the most efficient at breaking out the minerals in that rock? Carbonic acid. The very acid that's created when life decomposes and percolates up as carbon dioxide, making carbonic acid. So I look around these soils here, I don't think we lack for minerals. There's tons of minerals. What we lack is biology. We lack decomposition. We lack carbon decomposition that will make the carbonic acid that will release the minerals that are in the soil. And that's where this biology, see, begins to intersect with the chemistry. We think that we could just, buy the soil fertility, and actually the soil fertility is all about the microbial biological community in it that feeds on that what feeds it is decomposition, is vegetation that's decomposing. So essentially soil fertility becomes a carbon economy. Okay? And so here we were, Sir Albert Howard gave us the carbon economy through scientific composting: carbon, nitrogen, water, air, and microbes, the 5 ingredients of compost. But that required a lot of shoveling in 1943. And farmers that had lost one son in the war and another son's arm and a leg in a war, presented with either this little bag of 10, 10, 10, or you can start shoveling, and you're now 55, and you can shovel and shovel and shovel and shovel. Let's be gentle on old Grandpa, okay? Because you and I presented the same question, probably would have reached for that little bag of chemical 10, 10, 10 too. Are you with me? So, we go forward, 1945 to 1955. The whole chemical approach is fueled by the war effort. The making bombs, NPK, making bombs, gave us the mining, the distribution, the laboratory, the manufacturing, the marketing, and came to dominate our universities, our experts, and all the agricultural, PhDs worldwide. The infrastructure it took to be able to metabolize Sir Albert Howard's gift of carbon and biology, that infrastructure took 2 decades to develop. I mean, we didn't get a chainsaw until 1957. And then we got black plastic pipe, so we could get water. Make sure we had water on the pile so it didn't dry out. Okay? And then we finally got a front end loader on a tractor. And we got a PTO-powered manure spreader. In the U.S., if you go visit a museum that's like an old plantation, they'll tell you that it took one slave full-time just to maintain the fertility on 4 dunam of land. Full-time. Why? Because you're using crude tools, you're mucking out manure from a stable or a barn, putting it in an ox cart, trundling out to the field, climbing up in the ox cart, shoveling it out. That's a lot of work, a lot of shoveling. By the early 60s, we started getting tractors with front-end loaders. By the 1970s, we had four-wheel drive tractors with a front-end loader with hydraulics instead of, big levers and trip things. We had power takeoff shaft with, PTO manure spreaders. By 1970, we had all the infrastructure to leverage the carbon economy. This biological aspect of soil development, but the other side was entrenched. They owned the farmer, they owned the magazines, they owned the universities, they owned the politicians, they owned the agriculture agencies. In the U.S., we have the U.S. I call it. USDA, U.S. So they owned those things and weren't about to relinquish power. The people that say, oh, I'm just so thankful for the green revolution and the chemical fertilizer. Boy, listen, if we had had a Manhattan Project for compost, everybody knows the Manhattan Project. Right? That's developing the nuclear bomb. Don't want to leave anybody aside here. If we had a Manhattan Project for compost, not only would we have fed the world, we would have done it without three-legged salamanders, infertile frogs, and a dead zone the size of the state of Rhode Island in the Gulf of Mexico from toxic chemical runoff. Okay? So, here we were. Dad says, how do I make this farm pay? And all this advice, because of his dad's interest in compost and biological farming, realized that's not the approach. What is? And he got hold of a book by a Frenchman named Andre Voisin. And to speak French, you just kind of hold your nose. That's the way you speak French. So this was Andre Voisin, all right? And he wrote the book Grass Productivity and introduced Dad to controlled grazing, what Voisin called rational grazing, that you ration it out. If you are feeding hay to sheep or cows, and they need 1 bale a day, do you say, well, okay, I don't want to feed them every day. I'll just give them 7 bales for the week and then I don't have to look at them. Would you ever feed hay that way? Of course not. Why? They poop on it, they walk on it, they soil it, they mess it all up. Okay? You know what? That's the way we feed our pasture. We just let them walk willy-nilly. There's no control. So, Voisin said, you want to ration out your pasture like bales of hay. And as you ration it out, they don't soil it, you'll produce way more, the animals will be healthier, and lots of good things, and you can find them all the time, and they become disciplined and controllable, and you ration it out. So we began doing that. And he developed an electric fencing system early on, portable, and we started moving the animals around. And I remember as a little child, when I was this age, I could walk the entire farm and never set foot on a piece of vegetation. That's how bare it was. We needed electric fence to control the cows, but we didn't have enough soil to hold up electric fence stakes. It doesn't take much soil to hold up electric fence stakes. So Dad went to town, got used car tires, mixed concrete in a wheelbarrow, put the concrete in these car tires, stuck a piece of 1/2-inch pipe, one straight up and down and one on an angle for hills, he'd stack these concrete tires up on the tractor platform, and my brother and I, he was 3 years older, so we were, 5 and 8 or, 6 and 9. The two of us, we could get on these concrete tires, and as Dad drove slow through the field, we could tip these out. Then Dad would go along and stick the electric fence stakes down in those holes, the appropriate one, either the straight one or the slanted one, and then put up the electric fence and move cows. And over my lifetime, as we started doing this, and the chickens, and the compost, all the things, the shade mobiles, as we began doing this, I started watching these big 1 dunum rock saucers start to heal just like the scab on your hand. If you get a scab on your hand, you knock your skin off, right? How does that heal? You get a scab on it, and then it starts healing from the outside. And that scab, the little edges start chipping off, right? It gets smaller and smaller. Finally, it gets the final little piece, and it itches, and you rip it off, and you got new skin, right? That's exactly the way the soil healed. And I've watched this every year for 20, 25 years, this about yay much. Every year on the edges, the soil would build up over these rock saucers. And eventually, they completely closed up. Today, we don't use any tires. And today, you can't find them, you can't see them, and they have 12 inches of soil on them. It's not 3 feet like it was 500 years ago, but that's more than that. And it grows grass.
Can you plant the tree?
And it's beautiful. Excuse me?
Can you plant the tree or what is that?
Can we plant a tree?
Over, you have.
You could.
You
could.
See?
We have planted a lot of trees. Yeah, I mean, we planted, 60 acres would be, 6 times 4, 240 dumen of trees as a kid. In fact, about 6 years ago, I was able to cut and mill logs from the trees that I planted with Dad when I was 6. Okay? We built the apprentice cottage out of those logs that I planted with Dad when I was a little kid. So, yeah, this works. And so that's a little bit of the story. So let me, so what's our time like? 3. Now let me go ahead and show the slides here. What's 1:30 to, we've got 2 to 5 or something? 5, okay. All right. Let me show the slides now. So that's a little bit of the introduction, and I hope that helps you see a little bit where we've been, where we've come from. So when I come here, I come with encouragement. Now, I will tell you, ours was only abused for 200 years. Yours has been abused for 4,000 years. Or at least 2. Okay? And so, you've got a little deeper hole to dig out of. Okay, so we saw dramatic improvement very quickly, and we're not healed by any means yet, but it's a whole lot better than it was. And we went, when I was a kid, I well remember that, the first thing a farm kid gets to drive is the hay rake, the tractor with the hay rake. Because the rake, the mower, that's kind of technical. The baler, really technical. But the rake, you just get on there and you just, go around in circles. That's really easy for a 12-year-old to drive the tractor and, make circles. And I well remember making 10 swaths with the rake to make one little anemic windrow. Today, we do one rake swath and can't even step over it. It's so big and thick. We used to we used to not be able to feed more than 10 cows. Today, over 100 cows. Same ground, same place. I'm not saying this to brag. I'm saying this to pay gratitude and homage to a magnificent, fearfully and wonderfully made system. That it's our responsibility to leverage. We hear so much today that nature is a reluctant partner, and we have this mentality in Western agriculture that we've got to get this partner in a headlock. I'm gonna make you submit, and I'm gonna make you grow this, and I'm gonna, and then just actually, God has given us a benevolent lover that just wants to be caressed in the right places. That's a very different view of the land and our stewardship of that land. So let me go through some slides here very quickly. And we'll go through some of this, and then we'll take a little stretch break.
This chair very good. Back bending over.
Oh, that's a good one. Well, aren't you clever?
Clever.
Yes, very clever. That's why I brought him along. Okay.
He's the chair.
The chairman.
Chairman.
Yeah, the chairman. That's a real chairman there. Okay. So, why does the world have herbivores? Think about it. You know, we are told today by many people that herbivores are burping and farting, and they're. I'm sorry, you kids. That they are. We're all going to be crispy critters in a generation because they're going to melt the polar caps, and we're all going to die because of herbivores. That's an interesting idea, since 1,000 years ago, there were more pounds of herbivores on the planet than there are today, even with all the domestic livestock. You know, in the United States, right now, there are no more pounds of live weight humans plus animals. Today, there are less pounds of that live weight of flesh on the landscape than there was 500 years ago. We had 100 million bison, a big critter. We had flocks of birds that were so big they blotted out the sun for 3 days. We had 200 million beavers. They ate more plants than all the people in North America today. So all this food wasn't being eaten by people. Just like here, there were bears, lions. King David killed a lion, right? Samson ate from the carcass of a lion, okay? Imagine bears and lions here. It's as crazy as knowing that in the United States, just 300 years ago, they say you couldn't walk more than 2 miles without encountering a bear. Every time you walked 2 miles, say 3 kilometers, you met a bear. How would you like to take a walk in those days? Okay? But it's hard for us to conceive of that kind of life, that kind of abundance on a place. So, the reason for an herbivore, the reason the planet has herbivores is because plants need to be pruned to freshen them up for better growth. Do we think a viticulturalist is a bad person when he goes out and prunes a vineyard? No. In fact, we would say that a viticulturalist that doesn't prune a vineyard is probably negligent. Okay? What does he prune the vineyard for? To kill it? No. To stimulate fresh growth. And so as vegetation grows, it gets old and into senescence, and it needs to be pruned to be freshened up. And that's why there are herbivores all over the planet. Because God didn't build mowers. He built herbivores. Okay? Now, grazing, or I like to call it pruning, because grazing now has a bad connotation. You know, you're killing the planet. Pruning is all about how those animals interact. Now in nature, those herbivores, you look at the wildebeest on the Serengeti, those are the biggest wild herds today. You notice something spectacular about these wild herbivore herds. 3 things. They're moving. They don't stay in the same place. They don't just wander willy-nilly around. They're moving strategically. They're moving with the monsoons. They're moving because of the flies. They're moving because of the lions. But they're moving. Number 2, they're mobbed up. They're not spread out. They're in a mob for protection because there's a jaguar, a lion, a tiger over there. So they mob up for protection. And that mobbing becomes, when a lion looks at a bunch of zebras. Have you ever had 3 chickens get out and you're trying to catch 3 chickens? If you try to catch 3 chickens, you won't catch 1 chicken. You've got to say, I'm going to catch that one. And you concentrate on that one. Well, when a lion looks at a mob of zebras, it looks like he can't focus on one. And so that's why herds mob up, because it blurs the vision for the predator. So mobbing. So moving, mobbing, and then the third thing is mowing. They're mowing. Cows and sheep don't eat chicken manure. They don't eat corn. They don't eat soybeans. They don't eat grain. And they don't eat vegetables. They are sauerkraut vats. They are multi-stomach fermentation tanks taking in cellulose that you and I can't metabolize. We can't go out here and live on grass. But an herbivore can, because they have a completely different digestion system. So, in biomimicry, moving, mobbing, mowing, all right? We use electric fence to control the animals so that they're in a mob. Here we are with 300, 350 on 8 doomer for 1 day. Okay? The tool is electric fencing. Now there are all different kinds of electric fencing. But the electric fencing becomes a steering wheel, a brake, and an accelerator on that 4-legged pruner, so that we can steer that herd around the landscape with the same precision as a 0-turn mower on a golf course. First time in human history that's been done. Okay? So I'm not anti-technology. So don't blame the animal for the problems. Okay? It's our management. Here we are with 100 head on 4 dunum a day. Okay? Same principle. Electric fence comes in all different sizes and styles and all that. We use completely portable systems. And the fencing is made of two pieces. One is permanent. So this is permanent. I like to think about it like a ladder. So this is the stringers on the ladder. And then the temporary, right here, the portable, is the rungs on the ladder. And that's being made and unmade every day. That determines the size of the plate that the herd is going to get, because the grass grows differently. In drought, it gets very dry and mineralized. When it's wet and takes a lot more to get the same energy. Different times of year, obviously different numbers in the herd. You know, if the cows are dry, or the ewes, if the ewes are dry, they eat 30% less than if they're lactating. Okay, so you got all these variables, but that's why you don't want to just let them go willy-nilly. So we're making and unmaking these divisions every day. So they're not coming back to a corral. They're not coming back to a barn. They are out on the pasture where all their manure goes onto the pasture. When you move them all the time, they become very disciplined. And you can just take a string and run a string, and they don't know it's not electric fence. You couldn't do that for 2 weeks. They'd figure it out. But at least, short term, it works fine. So we're making and unmaking these fences. Now, what do you do when it doesn't rain? This is the big deal here. This is the pushback I'm feeling. Okay? We don't get but 3 months of rain. All right? Okay. So here we are in a drought. What you're doing with this is you're stockpiling forage on the ground. Think of it as standing hay. Now, you all here have an advantage that we don't have. See, life's never fair. You're cheating. Your cheating is that because your air is so dry, you can hold grass on a stalk and it will be highly palatable and nutritious for a long, long time. Because we have higher humidity, when ours gets mature, the humidity sucks that nutrition out of that grass and desiccates that nutrition, and so our window of palatability is relatively short compared to yours. So God makes provision is what I'm getting at. He makes provision for different places. We grow more forage, but we can't stockpile it for as long. You grow a little less, but you can stockpile it for a long time. Okay? And just so you know, just got an email from Daniel this morning. We just leased another property near us. We lease about 15 properties in the area. And we just went on to a new place. What's today? Today's Thursday? Monday they moved the herd over there for the first time. And this place, it was in limbo. So it has not had an animal on it for a year and a half. I mean, it looks blown out, brown trash. And we're in February. We're brown. And they're eating it just fine. Now, we're not making them eat it all. We're only making them eat about half of it. And they're chomping the rest into the ground to add organic matter to feed the soil. But here we are in August in a drought. You can see what that looks like. I want you to understand, this is the electric fence right here. See the electric fence stake right here. Electric fence right in front of them. This was 24 hours ago. Okay? Let's get a little better look at it. All right? Here they are moved in. Another shot. Here it is. They're going in. Same spot, 24 hours later. I want you to notice the mulch, the carbon, the lignified carbon. That's why we call this mob stocking, herbivorous, solar conversion, lignified carbon, sequestration, fertilization. And we wait a moment to let translate that. What she does is she just looks around and says, "My name is Bakir." Mob stocking, herbivorous, solar conversion, lignified carbon, sequestration, fertilization. Okay? And if you practice enough in front of a mirror, you can say it like that too. All right? But that's what this is. That's what this is, because here's the deal. What feeds the soil biology? Not protein, starch. Why can grasshoppers jump so far? Why can crickets, why can insects have this amazing strength? They are protein, they eat starch. Worms are protein. But what they want is mineral and organic matter, but starch. My point here is that this old dry lignified material, that's the way nature fertilizes. God didn't invent 10-10-10 chemical fertilizer. What he invented was straw, leaves, grasses, none of which falls to the ground or falls over until it's brown. So, if it will burn, if you can light a match to it and it'll burn, that indicates starch, sugar. And that's what feeds the soil biology. Okay? So, we want those forages to get long enough that we don't have to eat every morsel, that there are some brown lignified ones that the cows can tromp onto the soil surface to feed the worms, the actinomycetes, mycelium, azotobacter. Think about this. Azotobacter bacteria they're a freestanding microbe. In other words, they're not a rhizome hooked to, like a nodule on a legume. Okay? They will pull 100 pounds of nitrogen per acre. That would be what, 25 pounds of nitrogen per dunam per year? The atmosphere has more nitrogen than any other thing. But how expensive is nitrogen? Expensive. That's the most expensive thing that a farmer buys. Or it's hard to get, nitrogen. Okay. So these azotobacter will pull that out of the atmosphere. But they only work if they're over 4% organic matter. At under 4% organic matter, they go dormant. They hibernate. So this that feeds organic matter into the soil is feeding that organic matter, bringing it up to where it can support, and all those azotobacter, they wake up and say, "Okay, we can live now." And they start pulling nitrogen out of the air, which grows more plants, which makes more carbon, which makes more organic matter. See, when this is done correctly, it's supposed to be better and better and better. And when what we're doing makes the land worse, we know it's not being done right. What we're supposed to see is improvement. So, managing the animal is what manages the system. So here's what Here's what they look like on there. So just to bring the point home, the upper picture here, this is Cape Buffalo in Botswana, Africa. The bottom picture is cows in Swope, Virginia. You see the similarity? Nobody's hauling hay. Nobody has a barn. Nobody's hauling manure. And there's no smell and no odor. Okay? Different times of year. Top picture. This is February. Our February. You see snow, some leftover snow there on the ground. That stopped growing back in early November. November, December, January, February. This is 4 months. 4 months since that stopped growing. But because we were rationing out the forage, we were able to create hay on a stalk. We were able to create a bank, a head, that then we can put, right here we're running 100 cows on 2 dunam a day. 100 cows on 2 dunam a day. That's equivalent to 700 ewes. It's a 7-to-1 ratio. So 700 ewes on 2 dunam a day. So that means that if you had, let's do the math here, if you want to keep them for, let's say, 90 days, and we had 700 ewes, we would need 90 times 2, 180 dunams would hold 700 ewes for 90 days. Well, we're not going to come back to this until spring green up. Okay? So the rest period varies on how the grass grows. I'm just trying to, I'm feeling the pushback here about it doesn't rain here. Okay? Well, you know what? You don't get 3 feet of snow either. Okay? So every place has its issues. All right? Now, let me just hold on. Let me just do 2 other things just to bring this a little more home. Realize, Sim, I got that right? Good. Can you remember last night? Maybe one of you guys do that. We did the numbers on the organic matter and the water retention. It was every percent of organic matter. I mean, I know what it is in gallons and acres, but
15 cubes per dunam.
What was it?
1% is 15 cubes per dunam.
15 cubic meters
Right.
per dunam.
Yeah.
Per,
Water retention
all right.
for 1%.
Okay. So think about this. Every 1% organic matter holds 15 cubic meters of water per dunam. All right? Every 1% increase in organic matter holds 15
cubic meters.
15 cubic meters per dunam. All right. Remember my image about the building with all the rooms in it and the soil. You know, think about it like a big chocolate cake. Okay. All right. So every 1%. So on our farm, 1961, we were at right at 1% organic matter. Today, we're a little over 8% organic matter. So multiply 7 clicks, 7% times 15 is 105 cubic meters of water per dunum that we can hold today that we couldn't in 1961. Is that not cool?
He's asking how did you do it? He's asking how did you do it?
Okay, I'm showing. This organic matter, so what happens is as a plant, I think I want to do a drawing here. Maybe I could draw this real easily for you.
They were all different. Busted on top of that speaker.
Hey, there you go. Oh, good. There you go. Can everybody see this? Are you okay? All right. Imagine this is the soil horizon. In fact, we'll do this even better. We'll make the soil brown. So imagine that's the soil horizon. We're gonna put leaves up here. This is the grass plant. Okay. And we're gonna put roots on it. Okay. If you could get down at the soil level and look, the plant maintains bilateral symmetry. Bilateral symmetry. I like to watch her when she does that. Yeah. Between what's above the ground and what's below the ground. So what happens is when you come along with a cow or a mower and you prune off the top, guess what the plant does? The plant says, I'm imbalanced. So the plant sloughs off a bunch of roots. We call that pulsing. It's like heart beating. It's heart beating organic matter, like the blood supply into the soil. It's pumping it in. And the
Heating it up.
oh.
Sorry. It's going to shut it down.
Oh, okay. The reason that the plant does this is because let's imagine that you were out here and it was 10 degrees centigrade and you were naked and you were out in the rain. It was raining, 10 degrees centigrade. Well, you can have clothes on or not. What happens when you get soaking wet? At 10 degrees centigrade soaking wet, eventually you're going to start to hypothermiate, correct? Okay? Well, what happens when you hypothermiate? What does your body start to shut down? It doesn't shut down your liver. It shuts down your fingertips, nose, ear tips, toes, right? Because it's trying to preserve the core. So when you plant a 3-year-old tree, you're planting an apple tree. What does a 3-year-old apple tree that you're planting look like? A stick. They cut the top off, cut the roots off. Why? Because if they left all the appendages, the transplant shock would kill the plant trying to maintain itself with all those appendages. So they trim off the appendages so that all it has to maintain is heart, lungs, liver, okay, and GI tract. All right, but that's and kidneys. Okay, that's the idea. And so the plant does the same thing to make sure that it preserves its core, so that it can now put its energy in sending forth new shoots. And as it does so, it starts to regrow these roots. So when you go out here and you see plants, well, pick up sticks. This is a new game I've just invented. And you see plants that are constantly grazed right there. How deep are the roots? Right there. But when you let that plant get up ahead of steam, and you've got roots that go down, that plant is going to stay green longer and grow longer. So between moving your organic matter up for more water retention, moving your roots down for more water penetration, you start to chip off the shoulders of the dormant season is what I'm getting at. Okay? And so your 3 months of rain turns into 5 months. And then you stockpile out ahead, and suddenly you're out of the hay business. You're out of the barn business. You're out of the tractor business. And when you start becoming out of those businesses, you can put full-time attention on management. And that's almost always the weak link. So here we are in August with the herd. So let's move them. I'll say, that's just some shots of making hay. We do make some hay. I'm not opposed to hay, but we like to make as little hay as possible. So here we are. Here's a herd of about 300 ready to move. We're going to roll up the fencing. See, we're rolling up the fence here. Okay? And the cows begin pouring in. Notice, nobody's hurting them. Nobody's moving. There are no dogs. Listen, we try to move them every day at about 4 o'clock. If every day at 4 o'clock somebody called you to a bowl of ice cream, along about 10 minutes till 4, your tail would twitch and your ears would perk up. Right? That's the way the cows are. Now, I will tell you, we've been doing this now for 50 years. We've gone from 10 cows to 100. We've gone from rock to grass. We've gone from infertility to fertility. And again, I'm not bragging. I'm just telling you, when something breaks down and somebody comes to do custom work for us, they just always, they just can't believe it. They've never seen anything like it. And they wonder, what are you putting on? What are you putting on? What are you putting? It's not what we're putting on. It's what we're doing. It's the management. All right? But all of our wonderful neighbors, they're wonderful people, but they just don't, it just seems like too much work. And here's why. Here's their paradigm. Here's what they think. When you say the phrase, move cows, this is what we're thinking. You just roll up the fence and the cows just pour in behind you. Simple. All our neighbors, we're in Virginia. If you know anything about Virginia tobacco is a big deal. So most of our wonderful neighbors use smokeless tobacco. They put pinch in it, dip. Got some tobacco? No? They got the dip in the lip. Alright? And so, here's what they say about this. They say, man, move cows every day. I can't imagine moving cows every day. I mean, we tried to get the cows in last week. We chased them all over the hills. We used 3 pickup trucks, 2 4-wheelers, had the dogs out there, had my uncles and cousins. We chased them things all over, fed all day, and there was 3 cows. We never did get them in. They've been up over the hill, and we just left them. We just didn't get them in. I mean, I can't imagine moving cows every day. Right? That's because our paradigm gets in the way of what we can see. We have old sayings. I'll believe it when I see it. That's actually not true. The truth is, you'll see it when you believe it. That's the truth. You'll see it when you believe it. Because our heart, our paradigm, our worldview is so powerful that it acts as a sieve, as a filter on what we see. All right, so we're going to move them in. You see that? You see, so I want you to appreciate this right here looked just like this 24 hours ago. This right here looked just like this 3 weeks ago. So it's resting and growing back. Are you with me? So we're moving them around. There they are moving in, and now they're moved into their new paddock. That's what it looks like. We can do about water. We don't want to do this. I mean, if you drank out of your toilet bowl, you'd probably have worms too, right? So we use a portable trough. Everything's portable with a full flow valve. And we either pump, or on our farm, since we have elevation, we have permaculture style ponds that give us, we have about 17 kilometers of buried water line. That, like this, that gives us gravity pressure water. No electricity, no pumps, nothing, just gravity. As long as gravity works, we get water. When gravity quits working, I'm out of here.
How do you afford building all those ponds? Bringing the machinery?
Yes, we build the ponds with machinery.
That's a big investment.
It is a big investment. So are barns. So is grain. So is tractors. Okay?
You don't feed your cows any grain?
Excuse me?
You don't feed your cows any grain?
No, we feed the cows no grain. The sheep, no grain. Ever. Okay? They weren't designed to eat grain. Okay? We can plug in there anywhere. So this is a portable water trough, good for about 800 head of cows. 16 can get around there, or 3,000 sheep could use this. But this is the kind of infrastructure that you develop to be able to do this at scale. Shade becomes an issue. If you're going to move them around, what about shade? And so we have a portable shade mobile. This is one of the first things that Dad built as we began doing this back in the 1960s. And so instead of losing the manure under a tree, making an incubation area for parasites and pathogens, we can concentrate that manure on certain places. These are other shade mobiles, smaller, that we use now on some of the rental land, so we can take them down the road. And so we can put them on a rock pile, a bramble pile, and even hook them together. And very simple. And the cows, come up and shade under it. And so we can tell them, I want you to poop right here today. Next time, you can put right over here. And that has become an integral part of our fertility program, because where is the nitrogen? It's in the urine. What evaporates on a hot sunny day? The urine. So by having the urine protected with shade cloth, it goes into the ground instead of coming out. And when we first started this, back in the beginning, these spots had a 5-year halo. You could see the green spots for 5 years. Well, if you start doing this, you start covering lots of ground over a period of time, if all you have to do is touch it once every 5 years. So there they are hooked together, and you can put them on, bushes and shrubs and things that you don't want. So we have built a lot of ponds over time. We're big believers in ponds. We think that you just can't build enough ponds. And again, gravity pressure. We have 70-pound pressure water. I don't know what that is in metrics, but it's like a fire hose. And then we can irrigate. Now we've built enough ponds that now we can irrigate. I don't like using well water for irrigation. Aquifers for two reasons. One is it's dead water. Pond water is living. It's got salamanders and frogs and cattails. It's living water.
Do you have fish in those ponds as well?
Excuse me?
Do you have fish in those
We
ponds?
do have fish in the ponds. Yes, we
So
sure do.
rainwater, so filtered on rainwater, filled it up, filled up the ponds.
Yes. Okay. So let's just make a point about ponds. Worldwide, on average, 1/3 of all raindrops surface runoff. They either come too fast for absorption or when the ground's already saturated. The point is, when you have surface runoff, that means the cup of the commons is full. The sponge it can't take anymore, and so surface runoff becomes a flood problem downhill. Are you with me? In other words, to stop surface runoff, you're not stealing anybody's water. You are protecting people downstream from flooding. And then you're blessing them during a dry time with water when it's dry. Okay? So I'm making that point because around the world so many times, people, if you build a pond, you're stealing water. You're hoarding water.
It's illegal here to filter on rainwater.
Well, it's not a pond. This is a
natural swimming pool.
this is a fire extinguisher. It's not a pond. It's a fire extinguisher. It's a fire abatement. I've seen people around the world that have these really stringent regulations, and they just rename it, and it gets a stamp of approval. We have fire abatement. Okay? So, play the game. Outsmart the bureaucrats. Okay? You don't have to be the sharpest nail in the box to outsmart a bureaucrat.
You don't live in Israel.
Yeah, we were just told this morning by, what was his name? Avery? Yeah. That everybody knows Avery, I assume? All right, well, anyway, he's like the agrarian Israeli patriarch right now. It's like talking to Father Abraham. And he said that Golda Meir, am I getting this right? Golda Meir told Henry Kissinger that in all the other countries of the world, 95% of the people are stupid and 5% are geniuses. But in Israel, 95% of the people are geniuses and 5% are stupid.
That's not always a good thing.
And they're the manager. All right. So the other thing too is that size does matter, and so you can do things at small scale that you can't do big. For example, driving in here on the lane, when we went through that big valley down here, I pointed out to everybody that's a perfect spot to throw in a little dam. Okay, so it's just the size of a swimming pool, all right? But now you have water traps, and so you use your road We do this all the time. You use your road, you use your dam to elevate your road and build up water. So instead of a culvert going under the road, you have a pond and the culvert goes to the top. Okay? Here's your dam. Here's your water. Here's your bank going up, your bank coming down. So most people, they put their culvert through the bottom, okay? And this water runs down the hill, you know, and here's your road, you know, you've got this valley, and so you're driving on the road here, you know, with your wheeled vehicle. All right? And the water drains. It's the same amount of dirt to build your through the valley that you can drive on, but instead of putting the culvert in the bottom, you put your culvert in the top. Okay? And now you backed up some water behind there for the same amount of excavation. You follow that? And so that's one of the things that we do all the time. Every one of these little dips that we go through, we put a little pond in. And so I'm a big believer in lots of small ponds rather than, you know, one great big pond. Okay. So we can irrigate. This is the K-line system from New Zealand. It's really cool because it's modular. Cheap and modular. So here we are in a drought. You can see the neighbor's place across the fence. There we are growing green. So there are a lot of things that you could do to increase. We've talked about organic matter. We've talked about deep roots. We've talked about irrigation. We've talked about, you know, energy equilibrium on the plant. All those things begin chipping away at that dormancy. Okay, so that it turns what seems to be 3 months of moisture into actually 6 months of growth. Well, now, see, you're starting to chip away at that dormant period, and I've seen this done all over the world. There are some things I'm not confident about. That's one that I am, because we've seen it. We've seen it at our place, and I've seen it all over the world. So here's another little thing that you can do to extend seasons. You can plant annuals that like it hot and dry. Specific things, like this is Sudex. But instead of killing the sod with herbicide or plowing, this is called pasture cropping. And it was developed in Australia by a guy named Colin Sykes, who is a wheat farmer. And he had a horrific fire come through one year, and it burned his tractor, all of his equipment, all of his buildings. And he walks out after the fire and says, how can I restart and grow wheat again without any equipment? Because he didn't have anything. And he developed this pasture cropping system, which is essentially this. You use the animals to graze and then graze quickly again so that you temporarily weaken the sod enough to get an annual seed chiseled in that then germinates and competes and stays just ahead of the grass. Okay? And you can grow an annual ahead of the perennial. This plant is Sudex. It's an African, it's a hybrid.
Sudan grass?
Yes.
Sudan grass.
Well, Sudan sorghum. Sudex is the hybrid. Okay, so it's Sudan sorghum hybrid, known as Sudex. Okay? This is high sugar, very starchy, very sugary. Okay?
What was the name of the man?
Colin Sykes, COLINSEIS. You can either Google him or pasture cropping. Either way, it'll pop up. He's got whole curriculums and courses on this. It's quite phenomenal, actually. He's got, I don't know what, 2,000 Australian farmers doing this, and now some of us are doing it in the U.S. But we're not doing it to combine the grain. We're doing it to eat the grain. Okay? So the problem is, if you don't mash it down, the cows won't see the electric fence. So we're just running through there with the four-wheeler to mash it down so we can put up the electric fence so the cows can see it. Here's what I want you to appreciate. So here's the electric fence. This right here looked just like this 24 hours ago. This is 100 cows on 2 dunam a day. That's equivalent to 700 ewes on 2 dunam. Sheep? Oh, sheep would eat this stuff easily. Yeah, they'd love it. All right. So we've got the electric fence on now. I want you to appreciate too. So here's the grass. The grass is just dormant. The grass is just retarded underneath. Look at the earthworm castings. Look at that black soil. All right. But the sod is still intact. We didn't plow. We didn't herbicide. We didn't fertilize. We just used the animals strategically to give us a window of germination for this annual. Now we're going to turn the cows in. Again, this is 100 cows on 2 dunam, and you can't even see them in there. They're completely lost. But again, this looked just like this yesterday. So we're just stripping off little paddocks, marching through here with that herd. And that's another way to extend. This is called a forage chain. A forage chain. So you're actually using cold hardy and warm hardy, cold tolerant, drought tolerant, selecting species to create a forage chain to fit in to low points in your forage chain. Does that make sense? Okay? So, can everybody think about all the tools I've given you to deal with? It only rains for 3 months here. All right? We've talked about irrigation. We've talked about organic matter. We've talked about deep roots. And now we're talking about a forage chain of specifically selected varieties that love the shoulders of the season. Okay?
So the grass will come back here.
Absolutely.
No problem.
The grass comes back beautifully, and look at all that biomass. That decomposes, and it just explodes. Yeah, it explodes.
You sprout the seeds every year? The suet.
You spread the seeds.
Oh, if I did that here this year, I wouldn't do it in the same field next year. I'd rotate it. I'd do different things, different places. Okay, let's. There we are. Let's take a stretch break. Don't leave. Please don't leave. Let's take a 10-minute. Okay, just stretch, move around, say hi, and we'll reconvene in about 10 minutes and finish up some other things.